welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that sounds pretty serious. It's a newly discovered vulnerability in Intel processors called branch privilege injection. Sounds complex, but, well, it could have some very real effects on your digital information.
Exactly. In essence, this vulnerability might potentially allow attackers to access memory, maybe even data you think is safe in the cloud. It's really about understanding these, hidden weaknesses in the chips we use every day.
Okay, right. Let's try and unpack this a bit. Compared to other vulnerabilities we've talked about, what makes this one particularly, concerning?
Well, what's really interesting and maybe a bit worrying is that it hits something fundamental. It's about how modern processors try to be fast. It exploits this technique called speculative execution, which, ironically, is meant to boost performance.
Okay. So it's not like a simple coding bug in an app. This is deeper. In the hardware itself, what exactly is this speculative execution?
Yeah, it's deep. Imagine like a really busy chef. If customers often order soup, then a sandwich, right? The chef might start making the soup even before the order is fully placed, just guessing. If the guess is wrong, maybe the soup gets wasted. But if it's right, food's out much faster. Speculative execution is sort of like that. The processor guesses what instructions are coming next and starts working on them early. But sometimes that guess crosses security lines it shouldn't.
That makes sense. Efficiency is key.
Yeah.
But how does that efficiency, that guessing, create a security hole someone can actually use?
The problem is attackers can craft these really specific instruction sequences. They basically trick the processor during these speculative steps. It lets them momentarily bypass the normal security walls.
Yeah.
The ones that keep different users or apps separate, especially on shared systems like cloud servers. Think about apps on your phone. They shouldn't read each other's data, right? This vulnerability could sort of blur those lines for a moment on the processor.
So wait, in the cloud, someone could potentially peek into data that belongs to a totally different person using the same physical server. That sounds pretty bad for privacy. What's the actual mechanism? You mentioned something about a nanosecond loophole.
Yes, exactly. The researchers at ETH Zurich, they identified what they're calling branch predictor race conditions, or BPRC. The race part refers to this incredibly tiny window of time. It happens when the processor is switching between tasks for different users with different permissions or privileges. It happens so fast that the security checks sometimes lag behind the speculative actions. It's like a brief moment of confusion where the wrong permissions might get applied just for an instant. And that instant is the opportunity for an attacker.
Okay, a moment of confusion. And in that split second, what can an attacker actually achieve?
Right then, in that fraction of a second, the attacker can trick the processor into executing instructions speculatively, but with higher privileges than they should have. This lets them read a very small piece of data, just a single byte of memory.
Just one byte. That seems tiny. How can that possibly be a serious threat?
Well, you're right. One byte isn't much by itself. But here's the thing. This attack can be repeated very, very quickly. The researchers calculated it could potentially read over 5,000 bytes per second.
5,000 bytes a second.
Yeah. So while one byte is nothing, doing it thousands of times lets an attacker slowly piece together, potentially large chunks of memory content. Imagine reading a short email every second without anyone noticing. That kind of gives you a sense of the scale here.
Okay, I see it now. That speed changes things. So who needs to worry? Is this just a cloud server issue, or is my laptop at risk too?
The researchers are pretty clear on this. Basically, all Intel processors released since 2018 are affected by this. That covers a huge range of devices, your personal PC, your laptop, and yes, the big cloud servers too. The impact is definitely broad.
Right, and this isn't the first time we've gone deep on processor flaws, is it? I remember Spectre meltdown back in, 2017? Is this related?
Absolutely. This branch privilege injection is definitely part of that ongoing story. Spectre and Meltdown were kind of the wake-up call in 2017. They showed how this speculative execution could be turned into an attack vector. Then in 2022, we had RepBleed. Interestingly, one of the researchers on RepBleed, Johannes Wickner, is also involved in this new discovery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so all these vulnerabilities, they share that common thread, exploiting the processor's optimization guesswork to grab data they shouldn't access. And this latest work, it actually came about from looking into the fixes, the mitigations for RepBleed,
Right.
which suggests the problem might be, even more fundamental than we thought.
More fundamental. So are we talking about potential flaws baked into the very design of modern CPUs?
Yeah.
Because of this push for speed?
That's what some experts, including these researchers, seem to suggest. The constant drive for performance might lead engineers to make these low-level optimizations. And sometimes those optimizations, well, they have security side effects that only surface later through this kind of deep academic research, is like the speed-created inherent risks.
And fixing these deep hardware issues isn't like patching normal software, is it? You mentioned microcode updates.
Correct. Often the fix involves what's called a microcode update. You can think of microcode as the processor's own internal software, its instruction set. So these updates are essentially patching the hardware's behavior at a very basic level.
How do we get those?
Usually they get delivered through things like BIOS updates for your computer, or sometimes they're bundled into operating system updates like those Windows cumulative updates you see. So it comes via software, but it's changing how the chip itself operates.
Got it. So what's Intel saying about this specific vulnerability branch privilege injection? Did the researchers tell them?
Yes, they followed responsible disclosure. They informed Intel back in September 2024, and Intel has implemented protective measures in their newer processors and updates. However, the researchers do note that even with these measures, the underlying race condition, the core issue, might still be there. It suggests this might not be the last we hear about this kind of vulnerability.
It's a constant cat and mouse game, it seems.
It really is. Balancing performance and security in chip design is incredibly complex.
For listeners who really want to, get into the weeds, is the original research available?
Oh, absolutely. The paper has all the technical details. It's called Branch Privilege Injection, Compromising Spectre v2 Hardware Mitigations by Exploiting Branch Predictor Race Conditions. The authors are S. Rieg, J. Wickner, and K. Razavi. It's set for the 2025 UCNX Security Symposium. That's the place to go for the full deep dive.
Great. So let's try and wrap this up. We've dug into branch privilege injection. It's a pretty significant flaw in, well, a lot of modern Intel chips. It lets attackers potentially steal data by messing with how processors predict things to go faster. And it affects everything from PCs to the cloud.
Right. And it really throws a spotlight on that fundamental tension, doesn't it? The push for ever faster chips versus keeping everything secure. This isn't just some random bug. It touches the very foundation of how these processors are built, especially in our interconnected world where we share computing resources all the time.
It definitely makes you think. I mean, we rely so heavily on these processors for, well, almost everything digital. When vulnerabilities like this surface, these deep-seated issues, what does that mean for the future? For security, for privacy? It makes you wonder, what else might be hidden inside the silicon that runs our lives, and maybe what basic questions we should be asking about the technology we take for granted every day. Something to chew on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.